Justice Studies. Richard, a very good morning to you. I hope after that rant you're not going to tell me you're a lawyer.
I'm not a lawyer.
Thank God.
I disagree with what you say about lawyers, but I'm not one myself.
OK. Well, I have to tell you, though, you can disagree as much as you want, because that's what we have here, is a democratic place to have differences of opinion. But you have to admit that lawyers do, in many times, and maybe for good reasons, but not always, they complicate what it is that the law is trying to do. And what the law is trying to achieve is to punish bad people, lock up bad people, and make sure that bad people are not able to wish or do harm on good people. I mean, that's basically it. And I think there's an awful lot of lawyers who get in the way of that.
OK, no, that's fine. I mean, obviously, you know, we live in a democracy and it's important that we have a variety of different views. So I disagree with you about your general proposition about lawyers. And certainly if you're kind of think there's an issue about civil law, you know, so what you were just talking about, your the case where you're trying to get an office.
Yeah.
You know, often if you're signing a contract, or indeed if you want to sue someone, it's helpful to get a lawyer involved. And we can all think of situations where, you know, if we've been the victim of, you know, sharp practices by businesses or other things, that we may want to have a lawyer to help us, you know, get compensation and all the rest. And then likewise, when it comes to the criminal law, you know, if people have been accused of something, it's fair that they have a legal representation, and obviously they can be prosecuted. They'll be prosecuted by lawyers. So, you know, the law is what it is. It's a very complicated beast, and lawyers themselves disagree about what it means. And I guess, you know, that's part of the problem.
Yeah. Well, one of the problems we've got at the moment is that there are not enough people, for example, being arrested for crime. The police will say it's because they haven't got enough police, but that's clearly not true, because the police will turn up at things when they want to, and they find enough officers to do things when they need to. The reason for us talking to you this morning is that shoplifting, particularly at the moment, has become a massive problem. And there's a place in West London, in Chiswick specifically, where the shop owners are now locking their doors in order to stop the shoplifting epidemic, because it's the only way they can stop it. I mean, that's a pretty bad place to be for a country, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds like a kind of a sensible move by the shops in, you know, given an immediate situation. And we don't know whether this is just a bit of a flash in the pan situation, or whether it's a bit more of a long-term change in the way that, you know, people try to kind of steal stuff from businesses. It's worth remembering there's different ways you can steal stuff from businesses. I mean, I run a business myself. We have an office. You know, we have a burglar alarm. We have security locks on the doors. And you can't just walk into the building. You have to get yourself buzzed in and all the rest. So, you know, in one sense, there's nothing unusual about businesses, you know, taking steps to secure their premises. But, you know, I mean, the area I live in London, it's a pretty sleepy sort of, you know, suburb in South London. There are 2 or 3 shops there at least that kind of, you know, basically you have to kind of buzz to be let in. You know, typically opticians or people selling glasses, where, you know, they're a bit of a thing, and other shops may be selling high value goods that are easy to lift off the shelves if someone's not looking. So again, I don't know how new this is, though it does sound like there've been some really kind of upsetting and, you know, distressing.
I mean, I think it's new for shops as a general rule to be doing it. I mean, I think if you were to walk down Bond Street and look at very expensive jewellery shops and very expensive kind of, you know, clothing shops, they would probably have always had something like that, just because they didn't want to be ram-raided by people, you know. But the fact is that the shop owners and large chains, in fact, Co-op the other week were complaining that, you know, they've had one shop in London which was looted 3 times in the same day, you know. Yeah. And there's clearly an issue, because people, I think, have realised for one reason or another that they're not going to get punished. They're probably not going to get caught, and nobody's really going to stop them. And you've seen many countless videos, I'm sure, on social media of people walking into shops and literally just clearing the shelf into a huge bag and walking out. And you don't blame the shop owners for not stopping them, because they don't want to get hurt, they don't want to get stabbed. So I think it's fair to say that we are in the midst of a kind of, you know, wave of crime which the police are not doing anything about, as far as we can see.
Yeah, I mean, some really kind of, you know, concerning incidents, you know, many of them captured on video. And I guess that's a new thing, really, because that wasn't the case some years ago when maybe these things were happening, but we didn't have someone with a smartphone or a CCTV camera kind of uploading onto TikTok or YouTube. So that's perhaps changed our perception of the problem. I mean, if you kind of look at the kind of the long-term trends, the kind of the data on, you know, police recorded crime and, you know, crime against businesses, it stayed roughly the same for the last 10, 15, 20 years. But what we have seen, of course, is, you know, during lockdown, it did fall quite a lot, because lots of shops were closed. We were all at home rather than going about. And indeed, there was a drop in a number of crimes during lockdown. And kind of one of the things that's happened over the last few years as lockdown eased is that crime levels have gone back to the level they were before lockdown. And so when we see some of these rises, they're probably just the kind of a phenomenon of a kind of an unwinding of lockdown.
Yeah. Well, I would say just, I don't know where you live, Richard. I think you said South London. I mean, I noticed there's a lot more lawlessness on the streets in general, just walking around. And I was born and raised in London. You know, I've lived here for most of my life, one way or another. And this is about as lawless as I've ever seen it. And I think most people who walk around London would probably agree with that. And I think we've seen the police's own stats on burglary, where they basically solve hardly any at all. They don't even bother investigating most of them. Most of what you would call low-level kind of social, antisocial crime is just going on without really anybody paying any attention to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's... I don't disagree with you on that. I think there are certainly some issues, and what we don't know is whether these are kind of, as it were, a generational shift. So, you know, 20, 30 years ago, car crime was rife and rampant, and there were particular cars. I always remember the Home Office produced an index of the cars most likely to be stolen.
Yeah.
And at the time, some years ago, when this index was produced, the most stolen car in the country was like a 13-year-old Toyota Corolla.
Yeah.
Not because it was a particularly, appealing car, but it was, you could basically, you could break into it and turn the ignition on through the paper.
And most of those cars were being nicked for kids to joyriding, right?
Exactly.
But now we've got a business, haven't we? Now we've got Range Rovers as the most expensive and most likely car to be nicked because they're selling it.
But what happened there was that car security massively improved, with the electronic ignitions and all that, and they became very difficult to steal. And then 5 or 10 years on, thieves work out ways of hacking through the security of cars, and then we're back being told we've got to put those old kind of steering locks on our steering wheels. Right. We all thought had gone out of fashion about 20 years ago. Now, what will then happen, of course, is the car manufacturers will get back on top of the situation. They'll improve security, and probably car crime will go down. And there's lots of cases like that where, different forms of criminality, burglaries likewise, dropped through the floor some years ago because, homes became more secure. And actually the stuff that people would break into homes in the past to steal, they weren't as, appealing anymore. Taking a great big, 48-inch TV under your arm, not very likely.
Yeah.
So what happens is we're mugged on the streets for our mobile phones instead. So kind of crime patterns kind of shift and change as technology changes, as tastes change and all the rest.
Yeah.
And I think what we don't know at the moment is whether what we're seeing in these really distressing incidents in some shops is the part of a new normal, or whether they're just some kind of, some fairly short-lived, short-term trends which shops will get on top of, and then, thieves will move on to something else.
Yeah, difficult to say. I recognise that. But equally, you'd have to also admit that the number of stabbings have gone up in London, and there's an awful lot of people who are frightened of going out because they might be stabbed, particularly if you're a young black male. You're more likely to be stabbed than anything else. And nobody seems to be doing much about that, not least Sadiq Khan. So we haven't got a lot of time, Richard. I mean, I know this is probably an unfair question, but what can we do, to make things better? Are you saying we should just ride it out and wait until it goes away?
No, I'm certainly not saying that. I mean, at the end of the day, where there's criminality taking place, the police should be responding to that. They can't respond literally to everything. And so when you're talking about, shop owners and businesses taking reasonable steps to secure their premises, or homeowners likewise, or, all of us, just when we're going about our daily business. There was somebody the other day around my neighbourhood who had his phone stolen. He was walking down the road, looking at his phone. Someone went back on the bike and whipped it out of his phone.
And that's happening a lot at the moment.
No, exactly. Well, it's not victim blaming to say maybe if you've got a high-end mobile phone, don't walk down the road looking at your phone. Not least of all because you might walk into the...
No, listen, I say that to
we can all take sensible steps. But absolutely, the police should also be responsive to the needs of the community. That's what they're there for. Yeah,
exactly right. And also maybe it would help if you happened to clatter the bloke with a baseball bat while he was trying to steal your phone. They didn't arrest you for it.
Well, at the end of the day, it's, we have to kind of get the right balance. We have to get the right balance.
Yeah, listen, some accidents can happen, Richard. You know how it is. Richard, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Richard Garside, Director, Centre for Crime and Justice Studies. I mean, you'll all have stories, and I'm happy to hear them, about things that you've seen, things that you've been told, people who have had things stolen from them. I mean, I'm hearing an awful lot of stories at the moment, for example, of people who are finding that they look out the back window and there's somebody trying to climb in it. Or, they've left a window open in the front and they're in the kitchen, and next thing they know, there's a guy reaching his hand in trying to grab something that's inside the house.